year of the Trump presidency in August of 2017, a group of neo-Nazis assembled in Charlottesville, Virginia, and marched with their tiki torches saying, "Jews will not replace us," etc. That's just the little tip of the iceberg of the story. And now Beacon Press has published a brilliant oral history of the stand against white supremacy, of the people who were there to confront these Nazis. It's written by Nora Neus, N-E-U-S. You can find it wherever you find books. It's titled 24 Hours in Charlottesville. And Nora Neus's website is noraneus.com. That's also Nora's Twitter handle. And Nora's with us on the line right now. Hey, Nora, welcome to the program, and thank you for writing this book and sending us a copy of it. It's absolutely riveting.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
My pleasure. So let's start at the beginning. When did the local community find out that neo-Nazis were coming to Charlottesville, and what was the initial response?
We knew that there was this interest in the community from the KKK and from other kinds of alt-right white supremacists, really a year plus before the Unite the Right rally. The kind of catalyst for a lot of this interest was the removal of Confederate statues in town. And this is, was a national debate at the time and still is today. And it had ginned up a lot of interest from these kind of more extreme far-right groups. But at the same time, it wasn't just about the statues. It also was that Charlottesville was a very liberal town. It had declared itself the capital of the resistance against the Trump administration. And so there was all this kind of focus. But it wasn't until just a few months before the Unite the Right rally, which was August 12th, 2017, that we knew that they were coming for sure. And we knew that because they filed a permit request. So this was all above board. This was publicized, and we knew this rally would take place on this day.
So you say that this was, basically about the statues coming down, but I don't recall them marching, saying we're going to save the statues. I mean, they were ranting about blacks and gays. These statues were the statues of Confederate generals, right? In fact, wasn't exactly. Robert E. Lee one of them? And isn't Charlottesville the home to the University of Virginia, the university that Jefferson started as the first free college in America?
Yes.
Yeah. So therefore, it's a college town and a little more progressive. So the protesters show up. What had happened in the local community by way of organizing a counter-protest or a response to the protest?
There was an enormous response. And earlier that summer, the Ku Klux Klan of North Carolina had come. And so there was this big KKK rally with, as it was described in the book by one of the counter-protesters, it was kind of sad. It was kind of depressing. There was just a couple of guys there. It was really not a great showing. But the counter-protesters really showed up. And so there were thousands of counter-protesters by some counts there to say, this is not our city, this is not our community. And so then when we knew that the Unite the Right rally was coming, a lot of people said, okay, let's do the same thing. Let's all go out into the streets and show them that we're going to have a greater number of people in support of diversity and people of color and the queer community and immigrants than we will have KKK members or the far right members in our society. So the kind of activist groups and organizations really spun up quite quickly to try to drown out the hate, essentially.
And then tell me about the day of the protest. How did that play out?
So a lot of the story actually starts the night before. The night before the big protest, so this was now Friday night, the activists found out that the white nationalists were trying to have a little preview kind of event, a Porchlight Rally, Porchlight March around the University of Virginia campus. And so this would have been, again, the night before the planned rally. This one was somewhat of a surprise, except that the organizers had called the police and told them it was going to happen, and a bunch of anti-fascist websites and journalist outlets had posted that this was going to happen. So everyone kind of knew by the time that white nationalists were marching down the sidewalk with torches, most people knew what was happening. And these are the images that you might remember of white nationalists chanting, "Jews will not replace us," in blood and soil, very reminiscent of the Nazi marches in Germany.
Right. And that was when Heather Heyer was murdered, right?
So this was the night before. So a lot of people focus on the day starting Saturday morning. But part of the book is saying, you know, there is this larger context of what came up to it. I think a lot of times the conversation nationally is, you know, there was a freak accident or there was a white supremacist march in Charlottesville and things got out of hand and someone died. Whereas way more accurate would be to say that there was a growing context of a threat that activists knew was going to happen. And there was this attack the night before. There was the entire morning worth of events that we can speak through. And it wasn't until the very end of the rally that Heather Heyer was actually killed on Saturday.
Wow.
And it was really the culmination of all of this.
Yeah, and I think most Americans had kind of jumbled it all together in our minds into this one little thing. So
absolutely,
you know, so fill that in for us. The night before we have the rally, and or the march, the Jews Will Not Replace Us march, with these guys with their tiki torches. And well, actually, before we move on from that or into that. I'm seeing now that, like, you know, the Patriot Front people and these other, you know, white supremacist groups that are out there doing kind of the same thing now are wearing gaiters. They're disguising their identity. In fact, 3 of the Patriot Front guys are suing. I don't recall who they're suing exactly, but somebody, you know, doxed them, outed them, and they lost their jobs and they lost friends, and they're suing for reputational damages. I think this is in Idaho. Why were these Nazis so enthusiastic about just showing who they are? And why is it that nowadays they're wearing gaiters and just kind of sliding back into the old Klan hood thing? I mean, they don't use the Klan hoods, but, you know, conceal their identities.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is because of Charlottesville. I mean, Charlottesville, what made Charlottesville so unique and August 12th so unique is that it was really the first large-scale modern meeting of the entire white supremacist, far-right, white nationalist community in the U.S. in person. There had been isolated skirmishes, and there are isolated examples of white nationalist violence. But this was supposed to be the big meeting. This is where everyone was going to come in person. These friends they had made online, comrades that they, you know, thought they had from online, and they would all show up in person. And so this was really the first big gathering in person, and the largest in modern American history. And it changed a lot of their movement. And, you know, not to go too far forward, but there's a direct line between Charlottesville and January 6th, for example. And there are protesters who were at both. Yeah. And a lot of people after Charlottesville did start to hide their identities a little bit more, especially when a lot of people eventually, and only because of citizen sleuths, were identified.